I had a ton of success at 12. I won all 4 national titles, singles and doubles, kind of burst on quickly, was number 1 in the country in the 18s. And my peer group, was Agassi and Sampras and Courier and Chang, all of whom went on to be number 1 or 2 in the world. Of the 5 of us, they all turned. And I was the only one to choose to go to college. And I don't regret that decision in the least. I mean, you're traveling all over the world. I went through a 6-week stretch where I was in Australia 1 week, and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and then Jakarta, Indonesia, and then India. But it's that mental side, it's that ability to handle pressure, in the biggest moments, and not only not cave under the pressure, but actually perform better, have a heightened sense of focus.
Today on Same Game, Different Turf, we're going to see Al Parker, the most decorated junior player in U.S. tennis history. Unfortunately, injuries derailed his path at the wrong time. But we're going to see, when even one chapter closes, how his approach to stay intentional and unshaken has helped him become one of the lead advisors at Morgan Stanley in the wealth management space. We're going to see a guy that's still competitive, still composed, and has been very intentional with some of the choices he's made in life.
Why tennis? What sports did you play growing up?
I loved all sports, but the tennis kind of started dominating me from a pretty early age. So a lot of my other interests had to kind of get forced to the sidelines.
What age is that?
6. I mean, the first time I ever picked up a racket was 6 years old. We were on vacation over in Hilton Head because I'm from small town in South Georgia, and we were on vacation in Hilton Head. My mom just put me in a clinic over there, and when they came to pick me up, the guy that ran the clinic just told him, he's like, look, he's got a good talent for the game. He seemed to pick it up really quickly. You should get him lessons. So, they started driving me down to Savannah, which is like 45 minutes from my hometown. And it just kind of caught on. And I mean, I kind of took to it quickly. So, by the time I was 8, 9, I was playing competitive tournaments, all throughout Georgia and really even the South. I mean, it kind of became a full-time job pretty quickly, so they let me play basketball at my high school. I had a really small high school, and I was one of the better athletes. It was in a small school, so they let me play basketball and just come to practice, if and when I could. And I ran track, in the kind of the same capacity. But I would have loved to play football, baseball, everything. I just love anything with a ball and activity. I was all over it. But the tennis was just, it was too intense because I was playing. By the time I was 10, I was playing, high level state and Southern and even national tournaments. So, it kind of was like I said, a job for the next 20 years from 6 to 26 for the most part.
Do you think the other sports helped you in tennis though? Because people kind of only want to specialize in one sport early.
Yeah. I mean, I tell kids that today, that I do think being a dual sport athlete and having other interests helps from a number of perspectives. I mean, one thing for me that ended up being a problem with tennis was just I didn't get to play enough other sports. And so, I mean, all the motions that you use in tennis, there's definitely some wear and tear on your body when you're not able to kind of diversify your actions a bit. If kids are, able to play, another sport and not lose kind of the competitive edge in their main sport, I mean, I think that's great. I didn't really have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah. Where do you think the drive came from? Is it your parents pushing you, or is it you just being wired competitively?
Yeah, it definitely was not my parents pushing me. They were great about supporting my career. I mean, they gave me every opportunity that I needed, to succeed, but, never ever pushed me to do it. I mean, it really was probably internal drive. I mean, I've always been, I've definitely been competitive internally. I always have tried to be a good sport and, be very supportive of anybody I was playing against, but I always wanted to win. I mean, it was kind of, no matter what it was I was doing, if I was running suicides, with the team, or playing a match, I just, I kind of wanted to, I didn't really take a lot of time off, and sort of give anything away. So it was definitely internal drive that pushed me.
Yeah. Now, did you take me back as you're 12, 14, 16, 18, and you become, arguably the most decorated, juniors tennis player. What are you thinking during this time? Or is it just, I'm just playing and I'm winning and I'm
Yeah. It's, I get asked that question a lot, because I was unusual in my junior career and that, I was, a top player all the way from 12s, 14s, 16s, and 18s. I had a ton of success at 12.
Mhm.
Actually, one of my 3 junior records was I won all 4 national titles, singles and doubles. That year, it was called the Double Grand Slam. It was the first
Yeah.
time that had ever been done. So I kind of burst on
Mm.
quickly, and then I kind of had a target on my back a little bit. I mean, I always had kind of a healthy fear of failure, if you want to call it that, too.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I mean, I was confident in myself and my ability, but at the same time, I knew that I was playing against a lot of great players all the time, and that because I kind of had the target on my back early, um, they were always going to be coming for me. So I had to work that much harder. And I tell a lot of the young kids I talk to these days, it was funny after I would win a big tournament. There's definitely a kind of a little bit of a letdown emotionally, and you're happy and you kind of have this release. But my immediate thought was, I got to practice harder the very next day, kind of
Mhm.
thing. So I definitely pushed myself internally pretty hard, to kind of try to stay on top.
Tennis is an individual game. Then, like, how do you get your mind? I've read that book, Inner Game of Tennis, just because football, you got 100 teammates that can kind of
Yeah.
get you up if something's going bad or next play or whatever the case may be, but it's just you out there by yourself.
Yeah. It's good and bad. I mean, you don't have anybody to pick you up if things aren't going perfectly, but at the same time, you are also in complete control,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yourself, so there's nobody that can let you down either. The mental side of sports, the tennis, but all sports really is just so underappreciated. I mean, I think particularly when you get to the most elite level of sport,
Mhm.
that's what separates, in my opinion, because there's, tons and tons of great athletes in every sport and tons of great players, but it's that mental side, it's that ability to like handle pressure, in the biggest moments, and not only not cave under the pressure, but actually perform better, have a
Yeah.
heightened sense of focus. Some of that comes maybe through experience and putting yourself in that moment over and over again. But
Like in practice.
and practice too,
Mhm.
yeah. And some of it, some people are wired with it, and they
Yeah.
handle it better. I was in the position to either fail or succeed a lot.
Mhm.
I feel like that's one of my strengths has been my mind, my ability to calm myself and the ability to, actually almost, play better or perform better when it mattered the most. A lot of big moments, and for the most part came through much more often than not in the finals, of
Yeah.
tournaments.
And you had the unique position of either going pro or going to college. And, when people are at a crossroads, like, how do you even start to think about that decision? Because it's both were good options.
I was 16, 17 years old and already had a pretty high pro ranking. I'd played a lot of pro tournaments as an amateur and was already, I think, top 200 in the world. It's like 186 or so.
As an amateur.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
like either maybe 16 or 17 years old. I can't quite remember.
Oh, wow.
And then, but was number 1 in the country in the 18s, And so thinking about, do I go to college or do I go ahead and turn?
Mhm.
And my peer group, was Agassi and Sampras and Courier and Chang,
Mhm.
all of whom went on to be number 1 or 2 in the world, for many, many years to come. And, of the 5 of us, like I said, I was the top, player in the country, but they all turned.
Mhm.
And I was the only one to choose to go to college. And I don't regret that decision in the least. I do think maybe
What
if I,
sparked that decision? Or what was the deciding factor?
yeah, I mean, again, it kind of goes back to this thing I kind of touched on earlier, is just this healthy fear of failure, or sort
Mhm.
of, caution, if you will, just knowing that, I mean, a pro tennis career, while at the time it seemed like that would be my logical path, um, a lot of things still have to play out
Yeah, yeah.
perfectly. You've got to continue to be able to beat a lot of people that are going to be working just as hard as you, and
Mhm.
get great athletes, and great competitors. And then you also got to get past the injury,
Yeah.
issues that could crop up. And so I wanted to have the education to
Mm.
fall back on, in case the tennis career didn't work out. And I thought I could still develop my game,
Yeah, yeah.
at Georgia, as well. They had a great team and, had great coaches there, that I feel like I could still, not necessarily sacrifice by spending time in college. Um, so as it turns out, my freshman year at Georgia was my first major injury. I broke the disc in my back, my
Yeah.
L5. Um, And at the
Freshman
time,
year.
freshman year,
Yeah.
freshman. I'd started off that fall season and had a great fall season. I came in, I think I won the first 3 tournaments that I played, and it was all individual tournaments at the beginning of the year. And then I had the SEC indoors, and that's when the injury happened in the quarterfinals of that tournament. I saw all the top Georgia, all the doctors, and trying to get me back on the court as quickly as possible. But it was a pretty grim prognosis. I mean, they actually told me they weren't sure if I'd ever even be able to play tennis again.
Yeah.
There was like debate about fusion surgery and whatnot, but so I went through a period there, maybe 9 or 10 weeks where I couldn't play, I couldn't do anything. It was just
Jeez.
even rehab was difficult. I don't know whether that would have happened if I'd been on the pro tour, or not. So who knows how that injury would have played out. I do feel like, when you're in college, you are burning the candle on a number of ends. You're trying to study hard.
Yep.
You're playing tennis. You got a social life.
Yep.
Whereas if you're on the tour, you're pretty laser focused on becoming the best tennis player you can be, because that's your job, right?
Yeah.
So who knows how it would have played out, but I ended up I had a wonderful college experience. Had great success on the court. And absolutely loved my time at Georgia. And, Georgia's near and dear to my heart.
It's not a bad place to be.
Go Dogs, baby. And so look, I mean, even if I'd have gone on the tour, like we said, who knows whether I would have ultimately been, a very, very top player like Agassi, Courier, Chang, Sampras. But, things have worked out just fine for me on all fronts. So
Would you gain and would you learn from going to college? Just Al Parker as the individual?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely, learned a lot in school, that helped propel my business career. I majored in finance there. So my experiences, on the tennis court and with the team and just that culture was invaluable. I mean, today, most of my very, very best friends in the world are from tennis, and many of those are from Georgia tennis.
Yeah.
So, learning how to kind of compete as being part of a team, like you touched on earlier in tennis, it was individual pretty much all the way up to college. And if I think about the 3 segments of my tennis career, junior tennis, college tennis, and pro tennis, far and away my favorite, time period was my college days, because I really loved being part of that team.
You still made it to the pros. And so tell me, when you leave college and you decide, all right, I'm turning pro.
Yep.
What are your hopes? How's your body feeling?
Obviously had that big injury, issue freshman year, and that kind of still haunted me a little bit throughout my college career, but for the most part got past it, and ended up having a really successful college career, 4-time All-American. I think I won 12 tournaments and won 2 national individual titles. And so I came out, my senior year, I was top ranked player in the country. So it wasn't as if at that point, I'd really felt like I'd sacrificed a lot, going back to the 18-year-old decision to not turn. So still in a very good position, and heading out there, and still had high expectations that I could, kind of go on the tour and ultimately be a top 25, top 50 player in the world.
How common is that for people to go through college and become pros?
I'd have to think about it probably a little harder, but there are definitely examples of like John Isner, for example, great example, who was at Georgia for 4 years, and then went out and had a tremendously long and successful career. There's a lot of other players like from my era that maybe spent a year or 2 in college, and ended up being, a top 10 or 20 player in the world. David Wheaton's one that comes to mind for me. He spent a year or 2 at Stanford, and then like a Jonathan Stark, was ultimately a top doubles player in the world. Jared Palmer, a lot of doubles players, I feel like. I would say it's certainly not as common. I feel like more of the path of the very, very top players, top 10, 20 players in the world, are straight onto the tour.
Straight on tour. Gotcha.
And you're not doing college, but I may be missing some examples.
So as you're on tour, how's that process going for you? Like, as you work your way up to learn how to build, because that's a completely different animal from leaving the bubble of college to figuring out everything on your own.
Yeah, I feel like that was a tough transition too, because you kind of, like I said, you're part of this team at Georgia, and you got this big support network, while you're in school. But then all of a sudden, you're kind of thrust out there on the tour. And I didn't have a pro that I like a coach that I traveled around with. It was really just me, and I would find a buddy, and we would go to certain tournaments together. I think I went through a 6-week stretch where I was in Australia 1 week, then Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and then Jakarta, Indonesia, and then India, then Dubai. So like you're all over the place, and it's it takes a toll when you're trying to build your ranking. And, lots of times when you're trying to do that, you're also in some more remote places, where you're trying to maybe go where some other top players aren't,
Yeah.
to try to have a better chance to pick up points. And my ranking, I think, moved up into the I want to say 200s or so. So, I mean, I was kind of making progress, but at the same time, still battling those same injuries. I mean, it was not only the back that would kind of flare up, and especially with like long plane flights,
Yeah.
that was always a big kind of bugaboo for me, was when you're on a plane for extended periods. That's when my back would tighten up and I would just struggle to get off a plane and then play. But I also had some other injuries, like I tore my rotator cuff and I had some like shin issues. While I was out for the 2.5 years, I was out on the tour as a pro. In a month, out a week, kind of felt like that kind of mentality where it was hard to kind of feel like my body was fully engaged with, the end goal,
That's the part that's hard, as a guy that's had, concussions, broken bones,
Yeah.
torn knees, torn ham. Like, you can do so many things right, and then your body still like ultimately fails you. And it's this disconnect between what your mind wants to do and what your body can actually do at a given time.
No doubt. I mean, it's obviously it's hugely important, right? If you don't have your body, I mean, you can be as strong as you want to in your mind, but if you're, the physical state's not there, that's a huge issue. And, tennis is, it's a more physical sport than people realize. But there's a lot of motions that you use in tennis that aren't natural necessarily, that I think creates a lot of kind of wear and tear on the body that people don't appreciate unless you're like a player out there trying to do it.
Yeah, I remember learning on a clay court first, and then going to like the true hard or asphalt or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, you feel like everything in your body. I'm like, how do people play this on hard surfaces like this?
Clay is more friendly, I mean, it's more friendly than the hard courts. I mean, and unfortunately, throughout my early, days, I played way too much on hard courts.
Yeah.
And they weren't even the kind of courts that were even a little softer nowadays. I think they're a little easier on your body. Felt like it was almost true concrete.
It's like running around in the parking lot like we did.
Exactly. Yeah, not terribly different than that. So, I mean, but it, it was a good run for me. I mean, but I, thinking about like the whole transition piece, maybe I sort of gave up on it earlier than I should have. But, again, I'm 2 to 3 years in, and while my ranking had accelerated and I was doing fine by a lot of people's standards and making progress, I just kind of could see the writing on the wall that, I can stay out here maybe another 5 years and maybe I keep doing better and better and my ranking goes up. But also with the way these injuries are treating me, maybe I waste another 5 years out here and I don't really see the improvement, because I knew I had the education to fall back on. And I really thought I could be successful in business if I got in and got going. But I felt like every year was maybe one more, a bit more wasted time, if tennis didn't work out. So I kind of just felt like, kind of cutting it off and then going into business, sooner rather than later would be the right, long-term call. And I kind of just almost disappeared, I mean, where people didn't even, some of my fellow players, great friends from a young age were like, oh wait, Al's not playing anymore. So
Yeah, I think the self-awareness piece of anybody, but athletes, to know when you just no longer have it, and what you could be versus where you currently are.
Yeah.
And so as you make that decision to say, all right, I'm done, what is that process like? Because a lot of us go through these grieving processes of, we're leaving the thing we've dedicated so much time to, but now we got to go figure out what is the next thing we're supposed to do.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was probably the toughest phase of my life. It was tough for a couple of reasons. Like you said, you go from doing something you've done for 20 years, pretty much all day long, trying to be a better tennis player, to then, I'm now moving on to the next phase, which for me was investment banking, and finance. And that was a super intense job. I was definitely kind of, in one sense, grieving, of kind of the loss of tennis, and just that day-to-day physical activity that feeds you a little bit, when you're used to kind of sweating all day, grinding all day, and then all of a sudden you're behind a desk. That's tough. But also missing the competitive kind of going after, trying to win, not having that. It's winning in a new area. But so that part was tough. But then the new field I was in was super intense. It's arguably the most intense field of finance. So I was working super long hours, doing M&A work.
Most people don't realize that most athletes are highly intelligent, and they can apply that intelligence in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
as you think about it, I mean, you have options to go coach, you have options to go start your own business,
Yeah.
finance, or go do anything else. How do you narrow down and make the decision, I'm gonna go into investment banking?
I didn't really think about staying in tennis, even though that probably could have been an option. It could have been, like you said, a coach, or maybe gotten into media stuff or something,
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, I'd always focused on my education, even, I mean, all the way through high school, and then in college. I mean,
You got a 4.0.
I
How?
did. Yeah, I wasn't gonna say it. I didn't want to. But yes, I mean, I focused hard on my academics.
Yeah.
So I mean, I ended up finishing at Georgia with a 4.0 and worked really hard while I was there on the academic side.
Yeah.
So I definitely, and I was interested in finance. I mean, I've always been kind of a numbers guy. That was really kind of my primary interest. If I wasn't going to do tennis, I mean, I was kind of going to do something that I felt like would give me a great sort of long-term, career opportunity and financial opportunity, and align with kind of a lot of my non-tennis interests. I kind of knew I wanted to go into business and even into finance. Really, the decision was more about what area,
Yeah.
do I start in. And I had a great friend, or I mean, he was older than me, but kind of was a mentor to me. John Ross is his name, and he had played tennis at SMU, and had gone on to the pro tour. Similar, had a good solid career, but kind of ended up leaving it and got into investment banking, and had gone to Harvard Business School as well.
Yeah.
Ended up getting in touch with him because I kind of wanted to hear about his path, and he was very helpful to me, and really kind of pushed me to consider investment banking as the career within finance that I would focus on.
Yeah.
Just because it would, it is such an intense career, and I kind of viewed it as a way to catch up some of the 2 or 3 years of lost time, that I had on the tour.
Huge culture shock.
Big culture shock. Yeah. About the only athletic activity I got during those 2 years was we'd have, if we ever could, have like an evening basketball game within the firm, and I get to go out there and grind on the court for a couple hours and then go back to work. But in that job, I mean, I was in Charlotte, and it was probably the toughest 2 years of my life. I mean, it was a great experience, and it helped really set the platform for my business career. But I mean, I regularly worked. I think I worked 1 3-week stretch where I slept an average of 1 hour per night. So many all-nighters in that, and then a few where I might have slept 2 3 hours. So it's pretty brutal. You come home 6 a.m., shower, go back to work, try to finish a pitch for a deal or finish whatever it was you were working on.
It's like training camp.
It was rough. Yeah. I remember walking out of that job. I came down the elevator after a 2-year position was up, and I was going to business school. And
so you were committed for 2 years for that job?
Yeah, it's just
Gotcha.
a 2-year position.
Gotcha.
It's an analyst position, and you commit back then. You commit for 2 years. It's a little different these days. I'd finished my 2 years of grinding, and I was going to business school. And I remember coming down the elevator bank with my little box of stuff for my cube, and I looked around the lobby. And I didn't see anybody, and I put the box down, and I just went like this, like I'd won a major tennis tournament. I was like, I did it. I finished those 2 years, and about the only thing that I knew was that I didn't want to go back into investment banking. I was going to use business school as a 2-year period to kind of figure out, okay, well, what path do I want to take next? And interestingly, I ended up going back into investment banking for another 4 years. So.
But sometimes it's actually, we could be very rigid in like just willing our way through even challenging situations. There's the wrong challenging situation. You go to business school and you go back into investment banking, and you're in that same grind. When does it click to say, I need to go figure out something different?
Yeah, it took another 4 years for it to click. I came in as an associate after HBS. I worked my way up to VP, which is kind of one off the top of the ladder as a managing director. And I mean, it was all going great. It was running big deal processes, IPOs, and M&A. You may not spend as many hours in the office, the more senior you get in that career, but it's definitely a tough life. I mean, you don't have a lot of control over your life. You're an advisor, and you're on the timeline of the CEO, or the founder that you're working with. And that doesn't matter if your kid's graduating from high school, or, you got a family vacation planned. So it was one of those things where, I maybe wasn't in the office as much, but the pressure was more and more intense. I was traveling more. I was on the road a ton. I'm answering, emails and phone calls in the middle of the night. I learned a ton, and it probably accelerated my career well beyond the number of years that I'd worked. but I didn't think it was necessarily sustainable for me, especially if I wanted to have a family and have kids. And
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I've got 5 kids now,
Yeah.
so it would have been hard, to kind of continue down that path. Made the decision to shift
Mhm.
gears, into what I do now, which is wealth management.
The first time was kind of forced in a sense. This time it's more you're self-aware of what works for you.
Yeah.
Um, walk me through just where that self-awareness comes from and when you know that regardless of what the external noise says is I should do this, I should do this. This is what's going to make me the most happy and
Yeah.
like give me the life that I'm looking for.
It was really about that. I mean, I could just, while I was having success in that investment banking field, I don't think I was happy.
Yeah.
I was kind of just doing it. I was on that path, and that was the path I'd chosen.
Even though it's a successful path.
Even though it's a successful path, but it was not going to allow me to be successful, I think, in some other areas that were important to me, namely family. I wanted to be able to stay in high finance because I did, like I said, I enjoyed that, and that stimulates me intellectually. But I wanted to be able to have a better balance in my life, and ended up thinking about it, and hard, long and hard. It wasn't an easy decision, but ended up making the call to kind of take a big step down. At the time, it was a huge step down, both economically and just sort of big risk career wise. I mean, a lot of people, my dad looked at me like I had, 2 heads. He's like, "What are you doing, son?" I wanted to kind of move into an area where, our business now that I've done now that was 2002 when I made that shift, so now, we're 23 years later. I've been fortunate to build a great business in that field, but we very much kind of have our own entrepreneurial business inside Morgan Stanley. And there's a lot of things that are about what I do day to day that were appealing to me that I didn't have in investment banking. And I don't know if we want to get into the boring details of all of that, but
so you're in investment banking and you have title, you have, I imagine you're making a good living.
yeah.
And then you go to Morgan Stanley and investment banking where you have no title.
Yeah.
No book of business, no anything,
Right.
and you had to build all that up.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big transition. As you start out at Morgan Stanley, you get licensed, you get all that good stuff. What's even the process to go get someone to trust you?
Yeah. I worked really hard those 2 years in that initial transition because, like you said, I mean, you come in and, we were going after clients. I mean, our average client, what was typical minimum client is 20 million, of investable assets. So it's not easy to go to somebody in that world when you don't have clients, and get them to trust you. I was working with my, partner, Cooper, Pulliam at the time. And, he was great because, I mean, he had some clients already, but he was like me. We were going to build the business together for the most part. But, was kind of going through it with him, and we had each other to lean on and go after building this business. And, we had enough folks early on that trusted, in what we had done previously, and that we were hard workers and sharp, guys.
Previously, like the investment world.
Yeah, investment banking. And then for Cooper, he had, had a few years in wealth management as well. So it ended up working out, but it was it was a scary 2 years because, you're trying to like build relationships and you kind of a network of opportunities that will allow you to build a client base, but it doesn't happen fast. And it definitely doesn't happen fast in our world of the kind of clients we're targeting, right?
People know you as Al Parker, the tennis player largely.
Yeah.
People may not have tracked that you've gone to HBS and you spend, 6 years in investment banking. How do you change the narrative of I'm a former great tennis player, but now I'm a great financial advisor?
Yeah.
And get people to trust you in that regard.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to have some people that sort of just trust, right? Because I can't necessarily point to, well, here's my 5 to 10 clients that I already am working with, right? But I do think there's people out there, and there were for us, that said, look, this guy's worked really hard, and everything he's ever done is tennis, his education, his years in investment banking, business school. And so they're sort of looking at the overall resume, and they're like, while he may not have spent a lot of time in wealth management yet, he's at least shown a record of accomplishment, right? And everything he's put his mind to, and I had been in high finance, right? In investment banking for 6 years, so that's a lot of that knowledge translates very well into what we do today in terms of understanding valuation and, risk reward decisions. That was helpful. And, we had a number of folks that trusted early on. And then you've got a client base that you can actually kind of market to other clients, but you do have to have a handful of folks that believe in you, and they're trusting you as the person and you as the hard worker and you as with enough sort of overall kind of finance knowledge that it made sense for them.
You don't win every game. You don't win every match. You don't win every client. Walk me through those early days of trying to pitch clients and getting rejected and,
Yeah.
losing. And then the story that you were telling me about how you got your first client where they told you no, but you
Yeah.
converted it to a yeah.
When you're trying to build your business, as you know, you need to have kind of a lot of opportunities in the mix, if you will. You can't just sort of rely on two or three, families that you're focusing on and expect that they're all going to work out just because for one reason or the other, they don't always. Yeah. My first client with Cooper was and I won't talk about the family name, but it was a family in North Carolina who, we had gone through like a 2 or 3 month kind of pitch process, if you will, analytics process where we'd talk to them about, the business and how we'd run their portfolio. They'd had a liquidity event. And we actually thought that they actually had given us a positive decision and we thought we'd won the business, but then they kind of reversed course at the very last minute and said there was a local team, where they lived that they decided that they just felt like having a local relationship was more important. We were down in Atlanta and this was a family up in North Carolina. And it was just a crushing blow because I thought this was, going to be my first client. And then you get that kind of decision. It was brutal, but they ended up giving us an opportunity to fly back up there and talk with them one last time. And we were able to convince them in that meeting to reverse course again and choose us. So that was the first client win for me. It was a tough one.
You think sports help you deal with those no's of just getting back on and, trying again and not being okay with just hearing no or you lost this one?
Yeah. I mean, look, from early days in tennis, you learn that, there's going to be defeats and setbacks and tough times and tough moments. One thing I've always been pretty good about is moving on to the next, kind of what's in front of me, right? And not dwelling on the past. Try to learn lessons, from those setbacks and tough experiences, and hopefully maybe not repeat that same mistake again. There's nothing you can do about it, right? You can't. It doesn't help you like when I left tennis and moved into investment banking. Thinking about, where would I be now if I was on the tour? That doesn't help me any. That's over.
Can't live in the past.
So I've got to focus on what I'm doing going forward and try to do that in as positive of a way as I can.
In sports as athletes, we sometimes think that we can be in control. In your world, there's certain things that you can't control, what the markets are doing.
Yeah.
But then you're also responsible for people's resources. They've trusted you with that. How do you handle that when the markets are down and like things are super chaotic and these people are entrusting you to be the individual that makes it right?
The markets are going to do what the markets are going to do. And, we've always been very analytical and very statistically oriented with kind of how we approach running money for our clients. And I try to coach my clients to think that same way. And, if you look at 100-year chart of the stock market, it's tough to find the 2000 to 2002 tech meltdown or the 2008 great financial crisis or COVID in 20 or, pick any number of the kind of major bear markets. It's hard to even see them on the chart, so if you're trusting in the statistics that, the markets, if you think about things from a long-term perspective, are a good place to be, but you've got to withstand some volatility. That's one way to think about it, but we also have very diversified portfolios. I know I'm kind of veering off into kind of the details of my business, but, we're not only in equities, for our kinds of clients. Our clients have been extraordinarily successful. They've entrusted us with a lot of assets. And so they're not shooting to keep up with the stock market. They want to have a diversified mix. Risk management is very important to them. So we have a lot of parts of the portfolio that even during the worst markets are actually performing well, either making money or performing very well on a relative basis. So, we might be losing money in a terrible, terrible stock market because we will have equity exposure as part of our mix, but we'll actually look pretty good. We'll lose a lot less money than a terrible stock market. So oftentimes it makes our clients appreciate kind of what we do, from a risk management perspective. So I don't even look at bad markets as, oh gosh, we're in a terrible market. I actually look at them opportunistically because, we'll often have a lot of cash on hand or other defensive assets in place that when the markets are down big, we're often looking at that as an opportunity to put cash to work. when other people are fearful.
Let's veer off a little bit more because you have, these successful clients. What have you learned from them and how they approach business or approach transition in life? And,
Yeah.
because they're not as reactive to everything that they've been through a lot of storms and fires and have had to transition themselves.
I think one thing that they do a good job of is, their experience is not in investment management, and so one key takeaway that I feel like the clients that we take on board, that they trust us, right? They're like, I know you focus on delegating, and making other people more successful. And, I feel like when our clients are go through a liquidity event and they're thinking about, okay, well, which advisor do I pick to manage, my assets going forward? They're not wanting to get in the middle. They're wanting to pick who they think is the best at what they do, and then let them do that, right? I mean, within certain, risk reward parameters, we work with them up front to figure out kind of what tolerance do you have for volatility in the portfolio and figuring out the right balance in the portfolio. They kind of let us do our thing, and we report to them very regularly, and we're keeping them informed and, obviously giving them our views at all times, but they do a good job of trusting the expert that they've picked.
A lot of upfront work to hire the right person.
Exactly.
And then giving them the autonomy to do their job and not messing up the thing that they ultimately want in the end.
Yes. I mean, we've got, roughly 50 families that we work with. I mean, that's our client base. And I'd say for the most part, almost every single one of them, they trust us and they're not meddling in the decisions necessarily. We're happy if they want to give us ideas. I mean, look, they're very smart people, and I'm happy to hear from them, as to what they think is best. But at the same time, I do think generally our clients that have been the most successful have let us do what we do, well, because we've been through so many bad markets, and good markets. And, I think we've got a good process in place that ultimately, delegating and giving us that authority, and powers is most helpful long-term.
By all metrics, you've seen success differently. The childhood version of you, did you see this version of success, or was it just tennis?
Tennis. It was tennis. Yeah. I mean, if I have to be perfectly honest, I mean, it's hard to remember back that young, but I mean, I would say that from, a young age, I thought I was going to be a pro tennis player. As I got a little older, I think, and you start to understand different career opportunities, maybe, when I'm in my teens and then certainly in college, I definitely started to think it's maybe probably tennis or hopefully tennis, but it might be something else. And I need to have that second fallback option and be prepared for that as well. So that's, again, why I always focus hard on the academic side and always had kind of that business interest in the back of my mind.
As you reflect back, what advice would you give your younger self?
Maybe not be quite as hard on myself internally.
Meaning?
I was mostly blessed with success, both junior tennis and college tennis. I don't know if I always enjoyed it as much as I should along the way.
Yeah.
I often look back and wonder if I was having as much fun as I should have been having. I feel like a lot of it was a job, and it was pretty intense. Some of that I feel like was because, I mean, my early success, when I was in the 12s, it was maybe a blessing and a curse. I mean, it put me on a great path. But at the same time, I kind of had that target on my back. So a lot of my time through the juniors, when I was, again, kind of steadily kind of top player in the country throughout all the age divisions, I felt like if I didn't win, I had not done well. Right. And so I had this kind of internal pressure that, I don't know if I was always having fun with it. Right. So maybe if I had to look back on it, would maybe be to not take it all so seriously and so intense internally, try to make sure I was recognizing that I was blessed to be out there, competing and happy, healthy, kid, but you don't see all that at the time, right? When you're in it, you're in it.
It's weird now, like looking back and thinking you play a child's game for a living, and that child game gets you to the point to where you can go to college or do other interesting things. And it's just fascinating watching it now from this perspective.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it's interesting, being an athlete as your job. It's definitely a different world. I do feel like taught me all of the life lessons that I've needed, you know, to kind of be successful in business. I mean, sport is just such a tremendous training ground. I mean, I love to hire athletes, you know,
Yeah.
into my team or whatever it is, whatever business I'm working in. Just because I feel like you definitely have to work super hard, you know, to stay on top. So your work ethic is there. You mentioned earlier, I think you got to be sharp and smart, you know, in your mind, and you got to be able to handle pressure and be able to, you know, perform in tough moments. Um, you know, you got to be able to work in a team and in a lot of sports. I mean, you certainly with your football, tennis, not so much, but still there's doubles and then there's
Yeah.
college tennis, you know, so, you know, all of those things, you know, certainly just competing, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, you know, all of that is important when you go into business. So I feel like it was a great training ground for me, and it's been helpful to me in kind of what I've done in the second phase of my life.
You're in a competitive world, you know, you're pitching at Morgan Stanley's great, but there's other firms out there that are,
Yeah.
they have pitches and they're competitive and they want to win business too. What do you think from tennis has helped you compete at the highest levels now?
I think work ethic for sure. I mean, I have always believed in never let anybody outwork you. I mean, the things, you know, that you can control, in my opinion, you can only control what you can control.
Yeah.
Don't worry about all the noise around you. And so for me, it's always been about working as hard as I can work. And I try to instill this in my children, you know that you've worked as hard as you can work to go towards your goal. And then in your mind, use your mind, you know, don't forget about the mind as a powerful asset. And I was just with my little 10-year-old in baseball, you know, game yesterday. I always tell him, look, you're on the field. Don't ever let your mind, you know, know where you're going with the ball. You know, if
Yeah.
it comes to you, know if it doesn't come to you, where you're going with it. You know,
Yeah.
if you're at the plate, be engaged in everything you can do mentally,
Yeah.
you know, to be successful in that opportunity, and don't have something you look back on and say, well, gosh, if I'd have just stood a little closer, you know, and I forgot to do that, you know.
Yeah.
Use your mind as a weapon, both to be smart about how you're attacking things, but also use it as a calming influence and to help you perform well under pressure. So like all of that in business, you know, I think has translated for me, you know,
Yeah.
in big moments in my job.
I appreciate this, man. This is it is really just to get in the mind of people that have gone through transition. I think it's one of the more fascinating things, and it's not easy. And I think people assume that it's easy,
Yeah.
or that the success comes easier or faster than it actually does. And so just kind of diving into it.
No, I mean, it definitely doesn't come easy. It didn't for me in any one of my kind of life transitions. You got to kind of grind through it, you know, and you got to kind of approach it, you know, as positively as you can and work your way through it. I don't think there's any secret sauce, you know.
You ever kind of lose hope, or just like, man, I just don't want to do this, or like regret anything, or like any of that? Is just 'cause you're in it and it's hard and you're figuring it out, and you don't, you know, tennis is, you worked at it, but it came easy, and it like you were in your zone, and this other world, it's like, man, this is fish out of water.
Plenty of moments where I'm watching, you know, Agassi, you know, and Sampras playing the finals of a major championship, where I'm like, well, God, you know, maybe if I'd have stuck it out there a little longer, you know, I could be there.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, I mean, like you said earlier, I made the best decision I could make, you know, at the point in time, and I can't look back on that, right? And then I have been blessed with a lot of success in different ways since then. You know, it's all worked out great for me. I'm very, very happy, and so feel so fortunate with kind of how my life has turned out. It wasn't tennis, but it's been a lot of other things, you know, so that's good.
That's been a big thing that I've learned, is that you think that, you know, obviously you look at Agassi, you look at Sampras, you look at Nadal, and they're like out of this world successful. And that is the reference point, not realizing that there's out of this world success in other areas that you just haven't discovered yet.
Yeah, I know, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
You should turn them into clients.
I know, I don't have any tennis players as clients. Yeah,
you should.
I'm not exactly sure how that's happened. Now, granted, I mean, you know, those guys, I mean, Nadal, Federer, those guys, they would be great clients. But, you know, I mean, in athletics, you know, I mean, there's only a select few in every sport that make kind of massive money. You know, there's a lot that make a really good living, you know, but
then I got to go figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I appreciate it as a guy that is, you know, I'm a fan of, you know, everybody that has gone through transition, especially athletes, because I know it's that arc of getting to the other side is
Yeah.
not easy. And as someone that does it at a high level,
Yeah.
I wish you even more impact, time with your family, and success.
Well, I appreciate it, buddy. Well, I mean, you're as remarkable of an example of that with your multiple transitions in life. So proud of you and kind of all you've accomplished. And
I appreciate that.
go Dogs, baby.
Go Dogs. We'll get out there. I'll show you the backhand.
For sure. Maybe you can show me how to catch a pass, a long bomb.
One-handed passes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good stuff.